I hope you had a good quick lunch. And this is going to be a very interactive, and we're not going to make the participants move, but the moderators would be moving quite a bit. So we're just going to have a quick World Cafe session, and if you can see my screen. So since the morning today, you've heard quite a bit on nature-based solutions, mainstreaming, the different frameworks, policies, standards that need to be built that aren't existing, the gaps, challenges, and we had folks from different, from academics and from different sections really, and from the ministry, etc., talk about why we need to embed NbS into the cities, and also essentially why we need to embed NbS right now, since there's a lot of potential in Indian cities, since we are transforming the way that we are developing or aiming to develop. So this is a quick just session to get your inputs and understand what's really been going on since the morning, and just your expertise in collective narratives. So the aim is to really collaboratively discuss amongst your groups and create opportunities to understand like how and where we can integrate NbS in Indian cities. And we really don't have a big agenda in terms of no big outcome, but really we want to understand and center some of the urban NbS conversations and collect narratives and cases. While a few of you have put out in the map outside the different case studies, and a lot is on display as well, but really just try to pin down on some of the narratives and some of the operational and nuanced aspects of it. So quick setup of how the World Cafe is going to be. So there are going to be 8 tables, 8 moderators, and moderators, please, if you could come forward or just wave from wherever you are, or just stand up for a bit. And there'll be 2 groups, blue and green, very simple. So blue has 4 tables, green will have 4 tables. All blue tables would get to reflect on 4 questions, and green tables on 4 questions. So fairly, we have around 40 to 44 minutes. So each question say around 7 to 8 minutes, and there are going to be 7 or 8 people. So just make sure you're not repeating, and try to really reflect deeper and bring in that rich knowledge on the sheet. And finally, we would want the presentation by one moderator from the blue team, who would plus 2 blue team members or 2 green team members. So 1 moderator. So we'll try to see how we present towards the end, depending on how collective questions come across. So the only thing is, in this session, the moderator is going to move from table to table. So after the blue team answers question number 1, the moderator will just move towards the next table. So the moderators will move clockwise or anti-clockwise. We'll figure that out. So Prerna, Dhruv and I will just walk around to help you out, sort some of the questions that you have in mind, and also to make sure that everybody gets to answer everything. And I think moderators if you can just start going to the table, because the next is the question itself. This slide for some time would be standing. So the questions that we would want to explore today are really, what will it take to mainstream NbS in the current ecosystem, and what do you think is already happening? So there are a lot of things already happening, but really what do you think, as folks who've come here, that will make sure that we embed NbS? So it's really all the push and pull factors in the ecosystem itself. And then is really the principles, really why, what are the design challenges that cities are facing when embedding NbS itself. While the what, why questions are fairly clear, the how and the how-to are in a way interrelated, but we would still want to break it down to see what should really go in the SOPs for NbS integration in cities. And I think since morning we talked a fair bit about standards and procedures that need to exist or must exist to embed NbS in cities, and that's what is lacking. And finally, what are the suggestions to really you could make as a team to ensure that the shift in procurement processes become simple and adoptable? Because some of the difficulties are there, like the procurement processes don't exist, or if they exist, it's it probably doesn't exist, but if they do, like what can we change, tweak? How do we simplify it? So I'll leave the questions for a bit now. The moderators I would request you to write the questions on the sheet, and all of you, I'm assuming, have 4 sheets by now in hand, or you will exchange the sheets. So each one of you, yeah, you can start exchanging. And I mean, you can just congregate as a group and we'll walk around to make sure this is a smooth process. You want to make an announcement? Yeah.
Um, Hi everyone. Um, Thank you for joining this session, and we know that this is after the lunch, so we want to sort of make sure that there is some energy. The energy is not going down. So I'm just going to request, like Priya sort of announced, that we are going to have 2 groups, and 2 groups will have, each group will have 4 tables. So I would request the from the center of the room, all the tables behind, please, all the people come on 4 tables. Please accommodate yourself in 4 tables. And moderators are going to sort of help you sort of do that, orient you. And those who are sitting in the front, the middle people can sort of come in front, and please accommodate yourself on 4 tables. Let's do this as quietly as possible. If you have a full table, you don't need to move. But if you are not on a full table, I would request, please go and join another table. So we need only people on 8 tables. And if we can sort of do that, I'll request the moderators to help.
Okay, so the middle of the room where the fire exit number 1 is there, that side is blue and this side is green. Yeah, green. So this is green, you can write your team name also as green. Yeah, you're already.
So we have a blue and a green team. If we are all settled, can we, let's say the first half of the room is blue team and the backside rear half of the room is green team. So can I have a hand raise from green team if you are all settled?
I just said this is green, that's blue, so I agree.
Whatever. So which team is that?
Yeah, yeah, green.
So that's a blue team, and we are all settled for the blue team. 2 more tables are yet to settle. Moderators will come.
कोई instruction जो है ना, if anyone can give instruction, it will be helpful. Now we are confused.
No, you can
Sit.
Blue team, everything green.
No, now you're green.
Now we are green. All questions are same for all teams.
Yes.
Questions are same.
Questions are same. Questions are come floating.
I would request, if there is any confusion on the table, please wait for your moderators to come. They will come and explain how we are going to sort of move forward in the session.
Moderators, it's kind of up to you. So just see what's the question that your neighbor is writing. Don't write that question and just go forward with brainstorming with the other question. So just pick fast. Pick your question fast. It's on you. The race is on you. Clock's ticking for you. And then go back to your team. They're writing the question and they're coming to your table. Yeah, they will be floating around the different tables. So you will be answering all 4 questions. Your moderator face will change. First Siddharth will come, then Shaurya comes. So they keep moving around the different tables. We didn't want all of you to move around. Yeah. Because too many people, so yeah. Yeah, start. starting now. 45. हाँ ठीक है, that's fine. 3 and 4 questions together. हाँ, it's fine. हाँ, 7. No, they are not even there. 4. So you're doing question 1, 2, 3 and 4 are together. Yeah.
So they have 4 tables, or they are making 4 tables, but it's only 3.
Yeah. Okay, Harshan, if there are less. Okay, Harshan, one second. If there are very less people, then we can have 3 tables. You can ask the question simultaneously. If there are very less people. Okay, it's up to you guys. Yeah, just make sure things are going fine.
People at the back, yeah. So Ambik and I will be discussing the first question, which is what will it take to mainstream NBS, and what do you think is happening? So there were a lot of interesting discussions, and I'll just quickly go over some of the points. So the first point that was, talking about regulatory and policy frameworks, where we need to find opportunities for those integration at master plans, zonal plans, town planning level. Um, at local implementation levels, for example, what we need is a common language or a common narrative, because the understanding of NBS is varied and people need to be sufficiently capacitated or informed about what NBS is. There also, we need to look at how NBS is being implemented at different scales. So cities need to understand that, and how we can create sufficient economic models around those. At city implementation level, the regulatory frameworks such as bylaws, permissions, if NBS gets integrated there, then people would be more liable to comply. Also, behavioral shifts and empowering people was something that also the groups mentioned. Just one second. Okay. Localization of NBS becomes very important, contextualizing it. There was also a discussion on how NBS can become like a campaign, such as the Swachh Bharat mission. So if we create a mission around it, so then that can give it that much needed push. They also spoke about, data processes when you're doing vulnerability assessments or baselines. They need to be more inclusive and representative. There was also a discussion on, people tend to talk about solutions a lot in nature-based solutions, but people are not talking coherently about the challenges as well. So I think that's something that needs to be introduced. There was a discussion on how the startup energy needs to be more capitalized. So for example, you have accelerators, we need to talk about those. That ecosystem needs to be strengthened. Also, the policy ecosystem for NBS and MSMEs needs to be introduced. There were also talks about international collaborations, because there was this talk about, if other countries are doing it, if there's an international push, then why shouldn't we do it? So looking at it at a global level, so that there's more knowledge exchange. And then also talking about linking it to credit systems. And last 2 points is creating more opportunities for peer-to-peer learning, which is currently limited. And also that conversations like these need to move out of a Delhi and bigger cities and move to a tier 2 or a tier 3 cities. And finally, involving institutes such as ITPI and COA, which actually brings in the people who are going to be working within this ecosystem to understand if they are sufficiently capacitated or understand what NBS is.
I think that mostly covers also the conversations we had at the back, but which is great, which shows that everyone's on a similar page. But just a few additions was, one was also connecting the policies to NDCs so that there's a larger push from a top-down lens. Someone also suggested that maybe we could have a third-party rating system like Griha, but then another group said that no, that's not going to work, and instead we should maybe have a rating of states on how their NBS implementation is. And then also lacking data, GIS data or baseline data, which when we're actually implementing the NBS, we don't know if it's solving the issues that we're working towards. And then maybe looking at like how Chennai has an entire strategy for the city on connecting everything together. Can other cities do similar things? And then the last thing I think that was interesting was an entire group said that we don't really know enough. So I think there needs to be more case studies coming together, more forum related work that can add to it, not just individual organizations or people actually working on it. So sort of building it together and having some accountability.
We can move on to the next question. Question number 2. Who's going to be discussing that?
I think I'll have to have a hard time reading my handwriting. Okay, so hi everyone. So our question was question number 2. What are the design challenges that cities face while embedding NBS? So the first important thing that we come across was contextualization. For example, localized solutions are missing. A solution that is applied in Himalayas can't be applied in Western Ghats. So we need to have localized solutions to it. Number 2, going with our colleagues in group 1, land ownership. For example, if I go to a random city, Revenue department will say this is my wetland, forest department will say this is 50% mine, 50% people land. So how are you implementing, how can you design a challenge, how can you design an NBS there जहाँ land ownership की clarity नहीं है. Number 3 is communication to masses. So for example, still today, people in the cities and town aren't aware of what exactly NBS is, what does it revolves around. Fourth thing that comes into picture is inclusivity. For example, a lot of these days we're talking about just transition. So for example, I set up a green park in my locality, but what comes into picture? Taxes comes into picture, entry fee comes into picture. So where does we lack? We lack in inclusivity. Other thing, futuristic approach. So a lot of these solutions that we are, giving these days are more of a cap method. You find a problem, you give a solution. We're not thinking what will be the down the line 10-year decadal change into the picture. Other thing is ambiguity, lack of data sharing, going again with group 1. For example, for the same wetland, we get 4 or 5 different maps. Everybody has a different boundary, everybody is not sharing data. That is one of the biggest problems. All the thing which was common in all the tables in all the group was the space, accommodative spaces in the city. I can suggest number of interventions, but how and where can be accommodated? Then, so we have this Indian mentality. We want to believe in data, so there is lack of data. For example, I can recommend this XYZ intervention, but where is the data? Where is the proof? People ask for proofs. That is lacking in the Indian context. The other thing is that comes into picture is difference in priorities. So people living in high-rise buildings might have different priorities for their city, while people who are living in jhuggi and jhopris have different priorities. So wahan pe bhi, NBS action is a problem. Other thing that we discussed, we had a very good discussion at the table number 3, adaptive capacity. For example, I might today suggest that this is the particular species that I have to use and this is the solution. But who knows down the line after 5 years that is not suitable for my, for my area or my city. So design challenges that cities face is incentivization. For example, India promises that we'll be one of the biggest solar producers, but why are we lacking it in cities? People want money, everybody wants development. So the other thing is incentivization. A lot of these countries, when you see abroad, they have incentivization schemes which are promoting NBS and people comes into picture. Alliance between science, implementing bodies, governance, and local communities. This is like the gist of this answer. Like the alliance between all this is missing. So other thing that we discussed in the last table was master plans. So we had master plans, the NBS was not even a thing when we had master plans. So in the Indian context, the master plans need to be revised with a proper knowledge of NBS. So yes, I think anything else, like, do you want to add?
I think I just don't want to repeat a lot of these things, but one of the things that in our first table we were talking about is like how do we not have the grey infrastructure? I mean, how do we have the grey infrastructure as the focus? Because that's where the money is. And that also comes from a lot of vested interest from the policymakers and politicians. The other interesting thing was like, we all speak so much, but there are very less thinkers and there's not in-depth understanding of what we speak, which also means a lot of the things that we say, it's in a very superficial language. We need to really simplify these to make sure even a child can understand. A lot of things, I mean, talking about master plan, one of the conversation we had was like, how do we track our open spaces that have been prescribed in our master plan? Because a lot of them have been informal settlements and the master plan don't take account of the informal settlements already. Lack of assessment, lack of stringent NOCs, lack of monitoring, and there's just a lot of systemic inefficiency that is there, which also goes into your trust deficit. The other thing is like, we all speak about smart cities, but it is extremely technologically oriented. How do you redefine smartness? How do we incentivize people to have NbS solution? How do we have different spatial permutations for people so that you have a balcony, I can still be part of the larger thing? How do cities and ULBs connect their activities to larger carbon credits and thereby monitor and incentivize? So these are the larger points.
So just to conclude, like, when you read all these 4 questions and after the discussions, you realize that our knowledge is, overlapping. So I think that where the forum comes into picture. All these 4 questions are different. They have different inputs and different outputs. So I look forward to the forum that we'll have clear answers after that. Group number 3.
Okay, so a lot of points have already been covered in question 1 and 2, but we have tried to consolidate our responses across 6 broad headers. So we are trying to answer the how, as to we know what needs to be done, we know why it needs to be done, but how will it be done? And we are specifically answering how can we mainstream nature-based solutions integration into the processes of integrating them and implementing them through cities. So first, we need to define what are nature-based solutions. That can be through a criteria, and that can also be through like creating a dictionary of nature-based solutions that can be contextual, but the meaning and their scale remains, the scale can change, but the meaning remains the same across all the different regions and cities in India. The second was baseline mapping, and the baseline mapping we have to do across 6 different categories. So we have to do baseline mapping to identify the existing urban policies. We have to do baseline mapping to identifying the existing issues that we are trying to solve for. Identify and baseline mapping for the resources, and specifically the blue-green resources that are existing in the city, so that we can focus more on restoration, rejuvenation, rather than constructing and reinventing the wheel altogether. Then the third part was, and the most crucial part was, mapping all the stakeholders that will be involved in implementing a solution. That can be bottom up or top down. Then we also have to do, and this was very interesting, was map all the skills that are available in that region, so that we can do livelihood generation and implementation at a very localized scale. So what are the skill set that is already available in that region? And finally, baseline map of all the technologies that are available, because this has come out through a lot of conversations that nature-based solutions will not just be purely nature-based, they might be hybrid solutions. So we need to be aware of the technologies that are available with us. In tandem with this, we also need to develop a repository of solutions or best practices that already exist. And with all of this mapping, we can just match it as to what is available with us and what needs to be channeled to mainstream these solutions. Now, the third part of this is establishing boundary conditions and standards. Because we are talking about SOPs, standards is very important. So we already have like building codes and standards, but can we establish something similar for nature-based solutions? Now, one contradictory thing that happened on 2 of my tables was, one table suggested that can we have something like all government projects should, as a pilot, have 5% incorporation of nature-based solutions. But then the second table challenged it like this can be then manipulated, because then people might restrict it to that much, like just bare minimum, or
just manipulated in order to get more funds. So this actually can be overcome with another suggestion that came from his table, was establishing do's and don'ts within the SOP for implementing these nature-based solutions. Then the fourth part of how we can do it is incorporating all of this into existing policies and guidelines, plans and actions. So this was CPHO guidelines, ULB guidelines, State Action Plan on Climate Change. And all of this, while you're incorporating them into existing policies, they should be tracked. So because nature-based solutions are longer lifetime-based solutions, so you should track the timelines of these solutions, and then maybe they can be mapped to KPIs was one of the identified approaches. And then also doing a continuous monitoring and evaluation during the timeline of these nature-based solutions. Then the fifth part, and one of the most highlighted part throughout all of those tables, was dissemination, creating awareness and empowering communities. And this can be through ICE, behavioral change, including youth and children, using simplified formats, and then channeling or basing it on success stories that have been done in different regions of India. And finally, in order to mainstream the how, we have to incentivize, which can be through financial incentives. It can be through reward and recognition, something like replicating what Swachh Bharat Mission did for the Indian cities, and like creating like a ranking framework. And it can also be through like an impact metrics. Yeah.
Thank you, Shreya. I think you have covered most of the things. So one interesting thing that we came up with table backward is that we need to prioritize what NbS options we have. So first say we have multiple options, but we need to understand what are the case site specific situation there that needs to be taken care of. So that needs to be there. We need to have repository of best practices. So what are the different good examples that we can show in the SOP? Also, the one thing came up is that how much land is required for particular NbS integration. So for say if you want to implement a constructed wetland in a particular wetland site, how much land is required for that? That needs to be given into SOPs. So these are some major pointers that we kind of covered. Thank you so much. Yeah. Table 4, please. Yeah, question 4.
Okay, great. I think we've come to the last question. Yeah, interesting question, right? Like you did all of this, but how do you operationalize on the ground finally? So the question is suggestions to make procurement process simple and adaptable, right? So yeah, multiple connected pointers. First of all, relaxation of the tender criterias because because new NbS solution providers are coming into the market. How do they compete with other conventional solutions? So tender provisions need to be relaxed, but there was also an opinion that you can't relax it too much. You need to find a balance so that we have a certain scientific rigor to sort of selecting these solutions through the process. The other thing is tender processes emphasize more on financial criterias rather than technical criteria. So combine both technical and financial. That was one. Have stakeholder consultation integrated into the tender process as well, right? So which is largely lacking right now. So there was also a broad pointer on how do we validate these solutions, right, which are in the market. So there is a sort of lack of validation mechanisms. Having due diligence, coming up with criteria, coming up with performance ratings, these were sort of suggested. And then once the solution providers pass those criteria, then they're listed on a dashboard. They can be match made with governments, with private players who are seeking to implement these solutions. So sort of interrelated there. How do you push relaxation in tender criteria? How do you promote adoption of these solutions? Same like I think Shreya and Shreya was saying in the previous group that we should have state level schemes and state level rankings that promote, adoption of NBS. So that was the other pointer. Of course, collaboration between all kinds of stakeholders, right? Like, technical experts, solution providers, think tanks, etc. So everybody come together and then develop these SOPs, manuals, benchmarks, which can then validate the solutions that are in the market and then, be conducive for implementation on the ground. So these were some really interesting pointers that came. I think if you want to add.
I'll just put out the interesting points from each of the three tables. For the first one, we have the integration of informal sector, which really stood out for me into the procurement process for like integration of urban malis and gardeners. How do we integrate the informal sector into the procurement process? Another was the directory for green vendors. There's an already exhibition of vendors to participate, and then we have this in major cities of Delhi, but how to get that in tier 2 cities and to select unique solutions through an exhibition of sorts and have a digital library of these green vendors. And the third and the final was the standardization of costing for nature-based solutions, then to showcase what is the differentiation with traditional grey infrastructure solutions. Yeah, that is all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. So we break for tea and coffee, and then we have another panel. So, but thanks very much for all the inputs, and let's keep NbS conversations going. 4 o'clock? No, it's at 3:45. 10 minutes, 3:50, we'll start the panel. Thank you. Welcome back. Just know this is not to do anything with the next session, but just a quick, information about the World Café that was done. So thanks very much for your inputs again. But the idea is also to really pick up, some of the things that has been highlighted, and some, there were a lot of repetitions, but the idea is to really put all this narrative together and how we can use it to funnel the SOP that we are preparing through the forum to then take it through either the River City Alliance or NIUA or any of these anchor agencies to then spread it across the different cities, so tier 2, tier 3 cities. So thanks very much for the inputs, and we would be reaching, putting this, summarizing this into a document of sorts and sharing it with you. And also, if you are happy to contribute more, or if you see any things that you feel needs refinement, please feel free to reach out to the Secretariat. And there's also going to be a conference proceeding, so this would also be added to that. The proceedings would take a little bit of time, but the summary document would, for this particular World Café, would obviously come out faster. So thanks again for your inputs. Just wanted to, keep everybody in the room, aware of the fact that inputs from here will be going to this larger SOP that we are preparing. So just, yeah. Thank you very much again. And